It's the season of graduations in the US, a time of hope and cheer. But not this year. This year, US colleges have turned into battlegrounds. Thousands of students are out protesting. They want Israel to stop its war in Gaza. They're telling their colleges, cut all relations with Israel. First, let me pull up the map and show you all the top colleges in the US. But right now, they are all protest sites. Yale, Harvard, Berkeley, NYU, all of them have been affected. In some colleges, in-person classes have been suspended. Elsewhere, the cops have been called in. More than 900 students have been arrested so far. Take a look. Two changes to note here. First of all, the protests are spreading abroad. They began at Columbia University in New York, they spread across America, and now they've reached Europe. Let me show you the scenes in Paris. Students occupied the entrance to Sciences Po. It's one of the top colleges in France. They also had a tense standoff with riot cops. And today another college joined in, Sorbonne University in Paris. They unveiled a massive Palestinian flag outside their campus. Take a look at this.
Ce matin, les étudiants de Saint-Étienne ont aussi bloqué leur université pour l'arrêt des livres de bars, le cessez-le-feu immédiat. En ce moment même, les étudiants d'INALCO mènent une action. Et voilà, Gros Moulin pour discuter avec les étudiants de Gros Moulin pour mener une action. Il y a une action à Paris 8 aussi en même temps. Nous ne sommes pas isolés.
So the protest is spreading. Chances are more colleges and students will join, which brings us to the second big change. More violence. Until now, the protests were one-sided. Most of the rallies supported Palestine and Gaza, but that is slowly changing. There are reports of anti-Semitic chants at these rallies, even calls for a Jewish genocide. So Jewish and pro-Israel students are now turning out. They are organizing counter-rallies. And you can see where this is going. Two young, politically charged groups of protesters. It wasn't long before tempers flared. One push or one shove, that's all it takes. And these protests could turn into a violent brawl. A lot of students could also get hurt, which is why calm heads need to prevail. The White House is worried about the situation. They've called for peace and non-violence. But these are passionate students. They don't want restraint. They want over-the-top action. So where do things go from here? Such college protests are not new in the US. In the 1960s, you had the civil rights movement, and students played a key role. In February 1960, black teenagers entered a whites-only establishment. They refused to leave. Pretty soon, thousands of students joined in. The protest spread to 50 US cities. The same thing happened during the Vietnam War. Again, it began with Columbia. Students occupied the university building in 1968. The cops had to forcibly remove them. Most of these protests remained peaceful, but a few did cross the red line. At that time, most colleges had an ROTC, a Reserve Officers Training Corps. ROTC, the idea was to recruit students into the US military. But in the late 1960s, these ROTCs became a target. At Berkeley, its van was torched. At Maryland, the building was occupied, and at Washington University, the whole ROTC building was burnt. So there was a lot of violence and destruction. The deadliest episode unfolded at Kent University. Around 1,000 students were protesting against the Vietnam War, so the National Guard was called in. They shot and killed 4 students. Of course, this triggered more protests. Students at more than 450 colleges took out rallies. Compared to those, the current ones are baby protests, smaller in scale and violence. They resemble the protests of the 1980s, you could say. Students took aim at South Africa's apartheid regime then. Their demands were quite similar. Divest from South Africa. Colleges must divest from South Africa, that's what students said, and cut all links to the apartheid regime. Around 155 colleges ended up doing it. And by 1986, the US government joined in. They placed sanctions and divested from South Africa. So could there be a repeat this time? Well, that looks highly unlikely. For starters, Israel is not South Africa. It's a key part of US policy in West Asia. So divestment or boycott is out of the question. The students would be better off seeking more reasonable things, like a ceasefire in Gaza or more humanitarian aid for the Palestinians. Secondly, the protests are extreme. Opposing Israel is fine, but when it becomes anti-Semitism, it's a problem. We've heard chants praising Hamas, calls for the eradication of Jews, and discrimination against Jewish students. And that's not really the right cause. It's like fighting injustice with more injustice. Let's hope the students realize this, because their voice carries a lot of weight. They have influenced government policy on very important issues. So it's important to rally for a just cause and within the limits of the law.